Bullies target new black cheerleader, unaware her father is a Navy SEAL. They didn't see her as someone with talent. They only saw the color of her skin. And that alone was enough to stir up hatred. Subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. On the final Friday morning of August, the gymnasium at Westfield High School echoed with the sound of sneakers striking hardwood and hushed whispers among groups of girls. It was the day of the varsity cheer team announcement, a coveted spot that over 80 girls had sweated through 3 grueling tryout days to earn. But among the sea of golden hair and sun-kissed complexions so typical of Westfield, one black girl stood quietly in the third row, her eyes bright with unwavering resolve. Evelyn Barnes, 16 years old, 5'7", her curly hair tied back in a neat high ponytail, was the only girl with the last name Barnes, and the only student of color who had made it to the final round. Over the 3 days, she had missed no moves, toe touch, basket toss, liberty stunt, all executed nearly flawlessly. Even Coach Peterson had nodded in approval at her skills. But talent wasn't what the crowd was whispering about. What fueled their murmurs was something Evelyn couldn't hide, her skin color. "You all showed incredible spirit and discipline," Coach Peterson spoke up, holding her clipboard like a shield against the sea of expectant eyes. "And these are the faces who will represent this year's varsity team." Each name called was met with shrieks of joy. But when Evelyn Barnes was announced, the room froze for a beat. Evelyn stood still for a few seconds. She heard someone exhale sharply, a mocking snicker. But then there was applause from Madison Clark, the current team captain. Evelyn didn't smile. She simply took a deep breath and stepped forward to receive her name tag, her face calm, as if she had rehearsed this moment for years. At the back of the room, 3 football players had just walked in. Arthur Morrison, the team captain, still drenched in sweat from practice. Beckham Knox, towering, muscular, always scowling, and Carter Mills, lanky, reserved, with a constant uneasy smile. Arthur leaned toward Beckham and muttered something. Beckham shrugged, squinting his eyes. Carter silently watched Evelyn, then glanced at his friends, as if waiting for a cue. As the announcement wrapped up and the crowd began to file out, Evelyn grabbed her gym bag and made for the exit, only to find Arthur's group blocking the doorway. They didn't speak at first. They just stared. Arthur's lips curled into a thin, unreadable smile, the kind that never reached the eyes. "This is Westfield's cheer team," he said evenly, voice flat but cold. "Not some global unity parade." Evelyn stopped, turned to face him directly, no lowering of her gaze, no retreat. "That's right," she replied, her words sharp and steady. "And I'm here to lift school spirit, not to win your approval." For a split second, all 3 of them seemed caught off guard, not by her words, but by her eyes. Eyes that showed no fear. Arthur hesitated, just a beat. He glanced at Beckham, then gave a subtle nod. Carter remained silent, visibly uncertain. And then they stepped aside, letting her pass. But Evelyn knew. The hate hadn't disappeared. It was only beginning to ferment. That night, in a secret group chat named Real Eagles Only, a message appeared. "If the school doesn't know who deserves to represent Westfield, then we'll teach her a lesson." And from that moment on, the battle had begun, not between cheerleaders, but between prejudice and dignity, between silence and defiance. Evelyn didn't yet know how many attacks she'd have to endure, but one thing was certain. She would not fall. The dawn of the new week didn't bring the kind of warmth Evelyn had hoped for. Just 3 days after hearing her name announced as part of the cheer squad, she already felt an invisible resistance, as if every step she took landed on an emotional minefield. The first signs seemed like coincidences, until those coincidences turned into patterns. On Monday morning, She arrived earlier than usual to prepare for the team's first meeting. When she opened locker number 218, the lock had been broken off. Inside was chaos. Her books overturned, pencil case pried open, and her favorite gray hoodie stained with something thick, dark brown, and sticky, like BBQ sauce mixed with dirt. The stench clung to the fabric, making Evelyn nearly gag. She stood there silently for a few seconds, staring at the mess, then slowly began putting things back in place, not out of weakness, but to remember every detail like a crime scene investigator. She looked up, and at the far end of the second-floor hallway, a pair of cold gray eyes were watching her. Arthur Morrison, hands in his pockets, stood by the vending machine, a slight smirk playing on his lips, like he had just witnessed an entertaining scene. No one else was around. No witnesses. No evidence. Just that gaze. And Evelyn knew the hostility had now officially begun. At lunch, as she sat down with her group of friends in the cafeteria, a hard bump from behind tilted her tray, spilling orange juice across the edge of the table. Beckham Knox brushed past, turned his head, and muttered a mocking, "Oops." He didn't apologize, didn't stop, just kept walking as if she didn't exist. The girl next to her, Jessie, frowned and said, "He's never done that before. That's not normal." Evelyn gave a soft smile. Maybe it was just an accident. But in her mind, she added another item to the list. That afternoon, her phone buzzed with a notification from Instagram. A strange account, called True Eagle 2024, had tagged her in a post. It was a screenshot of the new cheer team list, with Evelyn's name circled in red. The caption read, "Did Westfield get whitewashed? Not my cheerleader. Bring back tradition." The post gained 64 likes within the first hour, mostly from upperclassmen, including Arthur's ex-girlfriend. The comments were full of sarcasm and just vague enough to avoid disciplinary action. Diversity doesn't mean qualified. She doesn't represent Eagle pride. Evelyn didn't cry. She didn't rage. She took screenshots of every comment, every like, every word. Then she created a folder titled Intel 01, encrypted with a 16-character password, just as her father, Henry Barnes, had once taught her. Evidence is a weapon, and weapons must be preserved properly. That night, in her small room, walls covered with posters of the 2016 U.S. Olympic women's gymnastics team, Evelyn sat in front of her laptop, analyzing the comments like a data analyst. She wrote down 3 observations. The attackers preferred anonymous accounts to avoid accountability. Their attacks aimed to humiliate, not to harm physically, but to destroy reputation. Their goal was to push her to lose her composure, to get angry, to react, and in doing so, ruin her own image. She told herself, "This isn't school bullying. This is a psychological campaign with strategy, and I'm not letting them win." Evelyn had never studied warfare, but she had now been thrust into one, where emotion was the weakness and self-control was the only armor she could wear. A new week had begun, and Evelyn knew, if these were just the opening notes, then the real symphony ahead would be far darker. But she also thought to herself, "They think I'll break easily. Let's see who really lasts longer." Friday afternoon, just 2 hours before the kickoff of the homecoming game, Westfield High's biggest sporting event of the year, Evelyn walked across the school grounds, gym bag in hand, uniform neat, her hair tied up high as required, a bright red bow standing out. She had just texted her father, "I've memorized all the formations. I'll be performing in the second row for the first time. I won't let you down." The message hadn't even sent before Arthur Morrison's icy hand suddenly gripped her arm. "We have a message for you," he whispered, his voice raspy and laced with malice. Before Evelyn could react, Beckham Knox grabbed her shoulders from behind, while Carter Mills blocked the view from the training field. 3 directions. No escape. Outside the gym, the morning's downpour had left a large puddle of muddy water, nearly 10 centimeters deep and stretching 3 feet wide across the doorway. Evelyn knew what was about to happen, but it was already too late to dodge it. "Stop!" she yelled, struggling. "Good luck in the second row," Beckham sneered, just before he and Arthur shoved her backward. She fell hard into the freezing puddle, her skirt ripping at the right thigh, where it snagged on a jagged piece of concrete. Her white uniform was now a filthy, mud-streaked rag. Her hair, which she had spent nearly 40 minutes that morning braiding and tying with a bow, had come undone, drenched. The wetness, the grime, the sting. It seeped into every inch of her skin. A second later, a voice rang out from the steps. "Evelyn!" Madison Clark, the cheer team captain, rushed toward her, eyes wide in horror. But any offer of help had come too late. A crowd of students had gathered, over 20 of them, most from the football team, and at least 5 phones were raised, recording. Laughter erupted in one corner. Evelyn heard someone mutter, "Preaching diversity but can't dodge a puddle." Another voice said louder, "Maybe she thinks this is her baptism." Beckham burst out laughing. Arthur tossed out one last line. "Brown looks good on you." They walked off, high-fiving each other like they'd just scored a touchdown. Carter turned his face away, but said nothing to stop it. Evelyn tried to stand, her left foot slipping in the mud, nearly sending her back down. Madison caught her, trembling. "They're insane. I'm so sorry. I didn't see." "I'm fine," Evelyn whispered, her voice choked. But no one walks away fine after a fall like that. And then, like a final strike, Brittany Stevens, an upperclassman on the cheer team, stepped forward, phone still clutched in her hand. "Epic fail," she said with a sly smile. "This clip's definitely going viral tonight." Evelyn said nothing. She regained her balance, pushed her hair out of her face. Blood oozed from her right knee, but she didn't wipe it. She wanted to remember the sting of it, the cold against her skin, the sharp humiliation of being seen as something lesser, the taste of filthy mud on her tongue as she bit her lip to keep from crying. Every feeling she locked into memory like a map of the battlefield. She walked away, one heavy step at a time. Behind her were whispers, camera clicks, and a crowd deciding who the real joke was. Evelyn didn't yet know that the clip would be shared over 43 times that night, or that the comments would label her a diversity hire who tripped over reality. But she knew one thing. They had just exposed their true nature, and this would be the last time they got to choose her role in her own story. In Evelyn's mind, only one sentence echoed. "They think I'll quit? Number, I'm coming back, and this time on my terms." The clock read 7:42 p.m. The front door of 1247 Maple Street creaked open. Evelyn stepped inside, her sneakers caked with dried mud squeaking faintly on the wooden floor. Her cheer uniform was torn at the shoulder, crusted with dried sludge. Her hair was a tangled mess, her skin pale from the cold and exhaustion. But most striking of all was her expression, not worried, but taut like a steel wire. In the kitchen, Henry Barnes was finishing his 3rd cup of coffee for the day. Without looking up, he set the mug down on the table with precision, as if he had timed the exact moment his daughter would walk through the door. "How far did they go?" Evelyn wasn't surprised. She didn't ask him to clarify, didn't deflect. Instead of answering, she pulled her phone from her pocket, scratched, edged with dried mud, and opened a folder labeled Intel 02. Inside were 5 videos, 10 screenshots, and a voice memo recorded just after the incident that afternoon. Henry took the phone, watching each file carefully, not missing a single frame. When he reached the clip of Arthur and Beckham shoving Evelyn into the puddle, he lingered longer, his face calm, but the veins on his wrist bulged visibly. "They thought you'd bow your head," he said, his voice steady like he was reading tactical code. "They thought a little mud and a few phones would break you." Evelyn sat across from him, hands clenched, nodding. "I'm not broken. But I need a way to strike back, not like them." Henry Barnes, retired Special Forces Lieutenant Colonel, former leader of 9 pursuit operations across Syria, Afghanistan, and West Africa, looked at his daughter, no longer a little girl, but a soldier pushed out of the trench. He knew what she needed, now wasn't comfort. It was a strategy. "Don't strike back while you're still shaking," he said, pulling a worn, dark brown leather notebook from a drawer. "Victory doesn't come from shouting louder than the enemy. It comes from making them think they've won, and then taking them down with evidence." He flipped to the first page, marked in firm handwriting. "Objective. Expose, not destroy." "They run their mouths because they think you're weak," he continued, "but you're not weak. You're patient. And patience is the rarest skill in any war." Evelyn exhaled, softly but deeply. "So what do I do? Collect, record, don't react, observe, track their routines, their words, the mistakes they don't think anyone is watching. We'll build the plan together." Henry reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small USB stick. "This is software that extracts data from the school's internal network. Not illegal, but enough to see who's commenting and from where. Start with the web." He tapped his temple. "The first strike is always up here. When you control the information, you're no longer the victim. You're the one writing the rules." Evelyn sat still for a moment, then nodded. "So, where do we begin?" Henry stood and motioned for her to follow him downstairs, to the training room converted into a personal operations center, complete with whiteboards, a map of the school, sandbags, and a single slogan pinned to the wall: "The weak shout, the strong prove." That night, the Barnes duo stayed up until nearly midnight, not to retaliate, but to reclaim control, with strategy, with justice. And Evelyn knew, from that moment on, she was no longer alone. Sunday afternoon, in the basement converted into a tactical analysis center, Evelyn and Henry Barnes set up a nearly 2-meter-tall whiteboard. On it, they drew 3 vertical columns, each labeled with a name: Arthur Morrison, Beckham Knox, and Carter Mills. Under each name were detailed personal files, not supplied by the school, but meticulously gathered by Evelyn over the course of 3 consecutive days. Arthur Morrison, senior, 6 feet 2 inches, 203 pounds, captain of the Westfield High School football team, had received full-ride athletic scholarship offers from 3 federal universities: Oregon State, Michigan Tech, and Baylor. His athletic record was impressive: 5 consecutive scoring games in the fall 2024 season. But through recorded conversations, Evelyn uncovered something Arthur had kept hidden: a disciplinary incident last year for fighting in the school parking lot, which had been cleared thanks to his father's position on the school board. Evelyn noted in her journal, "Reputation depends on image. Even a small crack can make sponsors pull out." Beckham Knox, left tackle, a massive and intimidating force. Yet beneath that rough exterior was a boy who had been suspended 3 times for aggressive behavior. His father left when Beckham was 8. His mother worked 2 jobs, and the family's finances were unstable. On Monday evening, Evelyn followed him after he left school early. She discovered him heading to the back of the library to meet a group of underclassmen and exchanging plastic vape pens. 2 transactions were carried out through the Venmo app, around $40 each. She took remote screenshots of the payment interface, noting the time and location. In her notebook, she wrote, "Weakness, financial pressure. Threat, serious rule violations. Carter Mills, the quietest of the group, always trailing behind the other two. Evelyn noticed that while he never actively participated in the bullying, he also never objected. She observed that Carter routinely left English class early on Thursdays, citing study group meetings. But in reality, he went to the music room. Evelyn overheard a conversation between Carter and the music teacher. "I can't ask my mom for more money to buy the MIDI equipment. They say music is useless." Tracking online clues, Evelyn discovered Carter ran an anonymous YouTube channel called CM Beats, dedicated to remix tracks, one of which had over 12,000 views. In her journal, she wrote, "Weakness, craving for recognition, has never been truly heard." Each night, Evelyn spent an hour reviewing footage, cross-referencing timestamps, and arranging information like an intelligence analyst. Henry taught her how to interpret behavior, detect lies in eye movement, and spot unease in footsteps. They called this effort Operation Echo, because every action leaves a reverberation, and Evelyn would turn those echoes into evidence. "A frontal attack only makes you like them," Henry reminded her. "But unmasking them with the truth, that's a victory earned with integrity." Evelyn didn't want anyone expelled. She wasn't seeking revenge. She wanted only one thing, for the truth to come to light, and for no one to ever again believe that being black meant being inferior. On Wednesday night, after completing her 13th analytical breakdown, Evelyn sat upright, her eyes sharp with clarity. In her notebook, she wrote a single line, followed by 3 vertical dots. "I'm ready. Friday afternoon." Westfield High School buzzed with excitement ahead of the interregional semifinal game. Down on the field, red and blue flags flapped high. Students gathered, cheering, and coaches blew their whistles non-stop. On the bleachers, the cheer squad was ready for their final dress rehearsal. But Evelyn wasn't there. She stood beside the rear parking lot behind the athletic complex, hoodie pulled low over her face. In her hand was an old pill bottle, the label faded, but still legible. Oxycodone, 5 milligrams, controlled substance. It was real, taken from her father's medical cabinet, a legitimate training prop once used in safety drills, now repurposed for something else, a strategic weapon. Silently, she approached a sleek black Ford F-150 with the personalized license plate QB1 star, Arthur Morrison's truck. Just as she had observed for 3 weeks straight, at 4:37 p.m. every Friday, Arthur left his truck unlocked for a few minutes, while inside prepping wrist wraps and reviewing plays with the coach. Evelyn gently opened the back door and placed the pill bottle under the passenger seat, right where she had previously seen him toss fast food wrappers. The entire action took less than 10 seconds. She turned away, pulled out her phone, dialed an anonymous number, and called the school's tip line. "Hello, I'm a parent. I just saw a student hiding controlled pills in a car in the rear parking lot. I believe it's Arthur Morrison's vehicle. You might want to check it before someone gets hurt." Then she hung up. 18 minutes later, just as Arthur was about to take the field for his warm-up throws, a silver SUV from the administrative office sped up. 2 compliance officers stepped out, their faces tense. From a distance, Evelyn watched as Arthur's name was called out in front of everyone. "We've received a report about unauthorized possession of medication," one officer announced loudly. "What? I didn't do anything," Arthur snapped, his face flushing red. They asked to search his vehicle. Arthur hesitated, but with the head coach, a few assistants, and nearly 30 students in the bleachers looking on, he nodded. The door was opened, the passenger seat lifted, and the pill bottle rolled out, clinking in the sunlight. "I've never seen that before," Arthur shouted. "I swear." But it was too late. A campus officer radioed local police. Arthur was asked to sit in the patrol car. Someone had filmed the entire incident. The clip was quickly uploaded to Twitter and spread like wildfire, captioned, "From quarterback to criminal in one bad play." or Westfield's shame. That night, Arthur's football scholarship from the University of Alabama, his largest offer, was rescinded. An official email was sent to his academic advisor. We cannot continue to support a student under investigation for controlled substances. Online, the comments split in two. Some defended Arthur, claiming he was set up, while others mocked him. So, QB standards are just painkillers and an ego the size of the field? Evelyn didn't celebrate, but she didn't regret it either. "Are you shaking?" Henry asked, as the two watched the video again from the basement. "No," Evelyn replied. "I'm just thinking. This is only the beginning. The first strike always disrupts the board." And indeed, the entire football team was thrown into chaos. The coach called an emergency meeting, assistants were interrogated for poor oversight, and parents demanded that the school screen all scholarship athletes. Wednesday morning. The weather in Westfield was brisk after a light early week rain. A slate-gray sky loomed over the schoolyard, and the air inside chemistry room 304, where Beckham Knox sat in the back row, was thick with an odd stillness. He yawned, twirled a pen in his fingers, his eyes drifting lazily as usual. But exactly at 10:17, a knock echoed at the door. It swung open, and Principal Manning entered alongside a school resource officer. "Beckham Knox," Mr. Manning's voice rang out without hesitation. "You're coming with us. Bring your backpack." The atmosphere in the classroom seemed to collapse in on itself. Beckham raised his eyebrows, tilting his head high in disbelief that he was the one being summoned. "What's going on?" he asked, his tone cocky. "Just come with us. You might prefer talking in the office rather than here." In the main office, inside the small room next to the nurse's station, 2 internal security staff and the assistant principal were already waiting. From afar, Evelyn watched Beckham's every move through the hallway surveillance feed she accessed, using the software her father had provided. When his backpack was opened and his locker was unlocked, the outcome came faster than she'd anticipated. 12 colorful vape pens, each wrapped in patterned paper to disguise them. $280 in cash, folded tightly into small rolls. And 21 nicotine pods, enough to qualify as distribution of a controlled substance on school grounds. Everything was labeled, photographed, and documented on the spot. Beckham screamed, his face flushed, pointing wildly. "Someone planted that in my locker! I'm being set up!" But everything had been orchestrated. Evelyn had recorded the entire moment Beckham made a deal with 3 freshmen behind the gym last week, right by the emergency exit. The footage was steady, unedited, faces clear, timestamp visible. She sent a copy of the original file, 56 megabytes, to Principal Manning's private inbox, with a short note. "I think you'll want to see this before deciding whether to believe his denial." Less than an hour later, Beckham was officially suspended indefinitely, pending a disciplinary hearing from the school board. But that wasn't the end. News reached Beckham's family. His father, Mr. Dean Knox, a warehouse supervisor at a local transport company, was summoned and terminated for failing to report criminal behavior by a family member. His mother, Mrs. Clarice Knox, a community health worker, was demoted after the family's scholarship assistance was revoked. Once one of the school's standout names, Beckham now became a whispered warning in the hallways. Friends kept their distance. The girls who used to follow him on Instagram began unfollowing in droves. On the school's Reddit page, a pinned thread read, "Who's next?" On the football field, where Beckham once charged with swagger, his spot was now filled by an 11th grader newly promoted to the starting lineup. No one spoke his name anymore. And that was the real death. The death in the collective memory of the student body. Evelyn stood at a distance. In her hand was the brown leather notebook, page 28, marked in red ink. Second target. Complete. She wasn't jubilant. She wasn't angry. She just felt lighter, as if a boulder had been cleared from her path. Henry Barnes watched his daughter from across the table when the two sat together that evening. "How do you feel?" he asked. Evelyn thought for a moment, then answered, I don't need to shout to be heard. I just need to show them something they can't deny." Henry nodded, offering a faint smile. "You're turning your wounds into weapons, and that no one can take from you." The week following Beckham's downfall was marked by an eerie calm at Westfield. But beneath that quiet simmered the echo of collapse, spreading quickly. Carter Mills, the final piece of the trio that once terrorized Evelyn, began to unravel. Without Arthur as a shield and Beckham as a fist, Carter seemed lost. He no longer sat at his usual table in the cafeteria, frequently skipped classes, and began exhibiting clear signs of anxiety. His hands trembled when opening his laptop, his eyes darted toward the door repeatedly, and he sometimes muttered to himself during lessons. Saturday night, at exactly 11:04 p.m., a 97-second call took place between Carter and Arthur. The content was later retrieved from an automatic call recording app Arthur had installed on his phone. "I can't take it anymore, Arthur. It's Evelyn. I'm sure of it. Everything. Every hit. It's coming from her." "What are you talking about?" "I heard my dad say Evelyn's dad used to be in special forces. I think she's playing us like pawns. So what do you want to do?" "I want to end this. Tonight." At 11:57, 3 bicycles rolled to a stop in front of Evelyn's house, a modest yet solid 2-story at the end of 17th Street, with only one security camera facing the street. But Evelyn was already waiting. She hadn't gone to sleep, not after receiving alerts from the custom security system designed by her father, a network of motion sensors on the fence and windows. When the chime sounded softly, she was already dressed in athletic wear, phone strapped to her armband, and the camera recording. The 3 boys climbed the fence and crept toward the back door, the one left unlit, thinking she'd be scared like before. But as they unlatched the door, Evelyn was already there. Arthur shouted, "I warned you, Evelyn!" Beckham lunged, but Evelyn sidestepped to the left and delivered a hook, precisely, to the bridge of his nose. The punch sent him reeling, blood pouring. Carter rushed to grab her, but she flipped him cleanly onto the grass with a takedown. Arthur drew a knife from his pocket, the blade gleaming in the night, but Evelyn spun, caught his wrist, twisted his arm behind his back, and disarmed him. It all happened in just 27 seconds. Police arrived immediately after, thanks to the emergency alarm Evelyn had triggered the moment they crossed the fence. When the 2 patrol cars pulled up, they found a scene they never expected. Arthur lying face down on the ground, nose bleeding, his hands secured behind his back with safety zip ties Evelyn had prepared. Beckham slumped forward, hands shaking uncontrollably, while Carter cried. Tears streamed down his face as he stammered, "I didn't want this. I just wanted them to stop." Evelyn stepped outside, hands raised, and calmly said, "These 3 broke in with intent to assault. I have camera footage, audio, and a witness. Mr. Larry next door saw them jump the fence." Police documented the scene, took photos, confiscated the knife, and escorted the 3 students into patrol cars. Evelyn didn't need to shout or prove her strength. It was her calm, precision, and preparedness that left everyone speechless. The next day, the principal convened an emergency meeting with parents, police, and representatives from the Regional Education Board. The break-in was classified as a serious criminal act and handed over to the Juvenile Investigation Division. Evelyn hadn't just defended herself, she had triumphed through composure, intellect, and the foundational training her father, a former Navy SEAL, had spent a lifetime instilling in her. That battle wasn't the end. It was undeniable proof that the black girl once shoved to the ground outside the gym was the one no one could ever break. News of the break-in and assault on Evelyn Barnes spread like wildfire. Within less than 24 hours after the police filed a report and referred the case to juvenile court, local media had picked up the story. But things didn't stop there. By Monday morning of the following week, a headline appeared on the homepage of USA Today. Assault on Black student at Westfield. Suspected racially motivated hate crime. Less than 36 hours later, the FBI officially got involved. They formed a special investigative unit under the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Act, a federal statute targeting racially motivated crimes. The FBI's regional office coordinated with the Rockland County Police Department to extract all mobile phone data belonging to Arthur, Beckham, and Carter. They also collected security footage, neighbor testimonies, and, most crucially, Evelyn's compiled dossier, which was over 200 pages long. Included in it were 67 screenshots of anonymous messages, 14 audio recordings containing discriminatory slurs, 3 video clips, including the gymnasium mud incident and the footage of Beckham's vape transactions, and a 21-page PDF of personal notes Evelyn had compiled over nearly 2 months, tracking movements, behavioral anomalies, and a diagram of connections between the 3 boys. Investigators concluded that this wasn't a one-off incident, but an organized, targeted action with racial animus, violating both state and federal criminal law. Westfield High School, under immense pressure from the public, underwent the most dramatic restructuring in its 62-year history. Principal Manning was forced to resign. Head coach Jackson was fired for negligent supervision and shielding students with dangerous behavior. The football program was suspended indefinitely, and all athletic scholarships came under review. The school board announced the formation of an anti-racism commission, the first ever in the history of the Rockland School District. The trial took place at Rockland County Juvenile Court, but this time the entire nation was watching. CNN, MSNBC, even CBS sent reporters to cover the case. In the packed courtroom, Evelyn Barnes entered with her hair neatly braided, wearing a turquoise blazer, completely unshaken. When called to speak before the court, she stepped to the witness stand. Her voice was calm and even, yet every word sliced like a blade through the backs of those who once shoved her into the mud. I didn't win because I was stronger. I won because I refused to stay silent. I don't want them in prison. I just want the world to know our silence is the soil where people like them grow, and I refuse to be silent. The court issued the following rulings. Arthur Morrison, 4 years in juvenile detention for organized assault, weapon possession, and a racially motivated hate crime. Beckham Knox, 3 years in juvenile detention for illegal distribution of controlled substances on school grounds and participation in the assault. Carter Mills, 18 months in youth rehabilitation with mandatory community service. He was the only one to plead guilty, cooperate with the investigation, and issue a public apology in court. Evelyn did not cry, but her mother, Judith, embraced Henry Barnes, the quiet father who had spent countless nights training with his daughter in their backyard. In his eyes was not triumph over an enemy, but relief that his daughter, a young black woman in a conservative town, had forced an entire system to reckon with itself. Outside the courthouse, hundreds waited. As Evelyn stepped out, someone handed her a sign that read, "You stood alone, so we could all stand up." For the first time in months, Evelyn smiled, not because she had won, but because justice had finally called her name. 1 year after the incident that shook the nation, the stadium at Westfield High School gleamed under the spring sunlight. Thousands gathered at the graduation ceremony, not just to witness the end of a student journey, but to see a young woman who had redefined the meaning of courage in her generation. Evelyn Barnes stepped onto the stage, wearing the cheer captain sash and holding the title of Student Council President, an unprecedented achievement for a black female student at Westfield in over 60 years. Her white graduation gown bore a small inscription on the sleeve, "Never back down." She didn't read from the speech she had prepared. Instead, she took the microphone, looked directly at the rows of seated students, and spoke without a tremble. "I was once shoved to the ground right outside this school's gym, and today I stand here. Not because I never fell, but because I never let anyone else define who I am. Bullies only thrive when we stay silent. I didn't choose to be a victim. I chose to stand, so the kids who come after me won't have to fight alone." The stadium fell silent. Then applause began, sporadic at first, then rising like a wave across the stands. Among the crowd were tears. Parents, teachers, even students who had once quietly avoided Evelyn now stood, as if trying to make amends for their silence. Since the trial, Evelyn had received over 140 interview requests from journalists and major networks like CNN, MSNBC, The View, and The Ellen Show. But she declined them all. "This story isn't for TV," she told her school counselor. "It's to remind people of their responsibility when they witness injustice." Instead, she accepted a full scholarship from Harvard University to study law, specializing in civil rights, a scholarship granted by the National Racial Justice Fund after reviewing the full case record and Evelyn's actions. The night before leaving town, Evelyn descended into the basement, the same room that once served as her and her father's training ground. Henry Barnes was wiping dust from the punching bag she used to strike every night. When he saw his daughter enter, he stopped. No words were needed. Evelyn walked over and embraced him tightly. The former Navy SEAL, once a team leader crossing the Sudanese border, now only whispered into her ear, "You didn't just fight, Evelyn. You changed the world." In that moment, she was not a media-protected victim, not a model student, nor a symbol of resilience. She was just a daughter who had walked through hell and come back to herself. 2 weeks later, a familiar bicycle stopped at the Barnes' front gate. The one who knocked was Carter Mills, or as Henry once called him, the lost boy. Carter wore a wrinkled white shirt, holding an envelope in his hands. His face looked gaunt. Dark circles rimmed his eyes like he hadn't slept for weeks. Carter held out the letter with trembling fingers, his voice choked. I don't expect forgiveness. But I can't leave this town without saying I'm sorry. For real." Inside the envelope was a drawing Carter had made himself, a girl in a cheerleading uniform standing in the center of the schoolyard, with the shadow of a warrior behind her and a sash that read, "Justice begins when silence ends." Evelyn stood still. She didn't say, "I forgive you," because forgiveness is not a gift handed out when someone apologizes. Forgiveness is when you no longer let them control the pain in your heart. She nodded, just slightly, enough for Carter to break down in tears. 1 year later, at Harvard, when Evelyn presented her first research paper on systemic racism in secondary education, her professor asked, "Where do you believe change begins?" She smiled without hesitation. With a girl who was shoved into the mud and decided to get back up, not just for herself. It was not just the end of a reckoning. It was the beginning of a living legacy, written in actions, in integrity, and in the refusal to stay silent in the face of injustice. And the name Evelyn Barnes, once circled in ridicule on social media, is now written boldly in the hearts of thousands as an unerasable symbol. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more. Watch the next video to see how the fight continues.